now we're ready to install our auto timer. Our auto timer comes with two installation manuals right here. One's an instruction manual, one's a vehicle-specific wiring diagram manual. So for our instruction manual, you open it up, and on the inside, you're going to see this. This is going to show you where all your wires go. Basically, we got a series of, I believe, 6 lines. You've got a 12-volt constant, ignition 1, ignition 2 outputs that go into the collar around your steering wheel where all your wiring and your ignition is. And then we also have our O2 sensor that goes to the ECU, a ground wire that will either go to the ECU or get grounded on the chassis, and a gray wire which goes to our parking brake switch. Now, if you don't end up using your O2 sensor, you can ground your wire straight. You can ground your black wire straight to the chassis. But if you do use an O2 sensor and you're using your narrowband O2 monitor, which is also a feature of our auto timer, you're going to go ahead and take your ground and wire it to the ground of your ECU. And if you have other components installed on your ECU line, you're going to want to space it out by an inch. So keep everything like an inch away from each other. Anyways, from here, you're going to go and you're going to open up your vehicle-specific wiring diagram. When you open it up, it's got everything from Toyotas to Hondas to Nissans to other applications. Since we have a Skyline, we're going to go to the Skyline section. We're going to work our way down. We're going to find out where the Skyline is, and it's right here. We're using the R33 with an RB25 DET motor. We find our year, we go across, and we find out we're going to use N4A. I've already circled it here. This is the diagram we're going to use. We're only looking for 2 wires, our O2 sensor, and our ground. So just like we did with the AVCR, we're going to do with the auto timer. We're going to find our wires, we're going to solder them, and we're going to be good to go on our auto timer. Alright, now we're ready to install our auto timer. In my hands, you see here's the control box for the auto timer, and connected to it are a series of wires that we're going to have to wire in. In my right hand, I have a gray wire, a black wire, and a white wire. The white one's going to be our O2 sensor that we're going to tap into the ECU, as well as our black wires are ground that we're going to be connecting into the ECU. Our gray wires goes to our parking brake, and in my left hand I have a green wire, a red wire, and a blue wire. Now this is going to be our 2 ignitions and our 12-volt constant that we'll get to later. First thing we're going to start out with is our black wire and our white wire to connect our ground and our O2. First things first, since we've already connected 2 wires off of our AVCR to our ground wire coming out of the harness, we're going to want to space out about another inch or so away from where our furthest most wire is and make a cut to wire in our ground. Go ahead, like our AVCR, and strip out the necessary amount of wires so that you can connect the auto timer ground. And then go ahead and get your wires connected. Okay, and don't forget to have a piece of shrink tube already on the wire once you got them connected together. Or if you don't have shrink tube, you can always use electrical tape. So once you have them connected, go ahead and get your solder and solder your connection together. Alright, just like that. And then just go ahead and slide on your shrink tube over the wires. And finish off the job by shrinking the shrink tube. Go ahead and do the same thing for your O2 sensor. Once you've located it, go through the same exact steps to connect that wire, and you'll be done with your ECU harness. Okay, so we've connected our ground and we've connected our O2 sensor. Now, as far as what we've been doing on the car, we're finished with the harness. So you can go ahead and wrap everything up, and then we're going to move on to our parking brake for the auto timer. Now we're ready to install our e-brake line, which is the gray wire. And as you can see right here, I already have the e-brake signal wire that I'm going to be tapping into. I just took off a little bit of the the shielding on that wire, so now I have a bare metal. And all I'm going to do now is tap into it by tying on my wire. And next, I'm going to go ahead and solder the connection. And then we're just going to use a little bit of electrical tape to shield that wire. Yeah, just like that, you're done. So now we can move on to our steering column and locate our 2 ignition wires and our 12-volt constant. Now we're ready to remove our cover from our steering column. Most cars will have the screws underneath the column. So go ahead and locate yours and unscrew everything, and when we come back we should have a bare steering column. Okay, like we mentioned earlier, you have the harness coming out of the control box for the auto timer, and generally the instructions ask for the harness that Apexi sells for the specific car. However, we do not supply harnesses for all makes and models. So in this case, we don't have a harness. We're going to go ahead and cut this off, which we've already done. And that leaves you with the 3 wires, this being your 12-volt constant, your ignition 1 and ignition 2. You find these wires underneath your steering column. We went ahead and located these wires by using a voltage tester, a voltmeter, and we went ahead and labeled what each wire is. So we found our 12-volt, our ignition 2 and ignition 1 wires. So we're going to go ahead and tap into these wires, and that should complete the installation of our auto timer. Okay, now we're ready to solder our first connection, which is our 12-volt constant. We're going to go ahead and solder this, then we're going to move on to ignition 1 and 2. When we come back, we'll have it all soldered, we'll recap, and we'll be done. Alright, we finished wiring up our auto timer. At this point, we're ready to connect the harness from our monitoring unit into the control box, like so. So now that's in. We're going to go ahead and find a place for the control box underneath the dash. We're going to button up the steering column, and when we come back, we're going to go over tuning. Okay, we're now finally finished with part 1 of our electronics install. At this point, you should know how to install our DECS tachometer, our EL2 series gauges, our auto timer, and our AVCR. From here, it's all a matter of tuning. We're going to have a lot of things that we still have to set up. For instance, on our AVCR, we're going to have to do a tune on a dyno or a closed track for some of you guys who don't have access to a dyno. Additionally, there's some adjustments we need to make on our auto timer, as well as calibrations on our gauges through the control box, as well as on our DECS tachometer. So we'll see you in part 2.